Szanowni Państwo, witam bardzo serdecznie na drugiej części naszego dzisiejszego programu. Tak jak wspominałem 2 godziny temu, przygotowując się do tegorocznego 4. Forum Europa z widokiem na przyszłość, zainspirowaliśmy się nie tylko ważnymi jubileuszami w tym roku, ale też ważnymi wydarzeniami, które czekają nas w Europie i w Polsce. Lipiec będzie dla Polski i dla Europy bardzo ważnym miesiącem. Na początku miesiąca szczyt NATO, pod koniec miesiąca Światowy Zjazd Młodzieży i wizyta papieża Franciszka. W ciekawy sposób wówczas nasze też wewnętrzne polskie debaty, środkowoeuropejskie debaty połączą się z globalnymi. W tym kontekście zaprosiliśmy wybitnych ekspertów polityki bezpieczeństwa do refleksji w przeddzień szczytu NATO w Polsce. Bardzo się cieszę, że nasze zaproszenie przyjęli, mogę to powiedzieć, przyjaciele Europejskiego Centrum Solidarności. Witam bardzo serdecznie, żeby nie popełnić faux pas, jednocześnie przywitam ambasadora i Francji, i Stanów Zjednoczonych, pana Pierre'a Bühlera i pana Jonesa. Bardzo serdecznie witam. Obydwa partnerstwa są dla nas strategiczne i bardzo ważne. Nie wyobrażam sobie Stanów Zjednoczonych bez przyjaźni amerykańsko-francuskiej, a Pierre Bühler reprezentuje jak najbardziej kosmopolityczne tradycje Republiki Francuskiej. Bardzo serdecznie witam panów ambasadorów. Bardzo się cieszę, że jest tutaj ponownie w Europejskim Centrum Solidarności nasz, też mogę powiedzieć, przyjaciel Seth Jones, dyrektor Rand Corporation z Waszyngtonu. Seth, witam cię bardzo serdecznie, którego pasjonuje kwestia, jak soft power wpływało na ład europejski, na politykę międzynarodową w ostatnich dekadach, jaką rolę też tu Solidarność miała na zmiany geopolityczne w Europie, przed jakimi wyzwaniami dzisiaj stoimy i jak powinna wyglądać interakcja między państwami narodowymi, sojuszami, a też nowymi aktorami polityki międzynarodowej. Polską stronę, można powiedzieć symbolicznie, gospodarzy szczytu reprezentują pan Dominik Jankowski, witam pana bardzo serdecznie, i reprezentuje nie pierwszy raz na forum dr Sławomir Dębski, w tym roku w nowej roli dyrektora Polskiego Instytutu Spraw Międzynarodowych. Witam panów bardzo serdecznie. Witam ponownie absolwenta Akademii Solidarności, który będzie moderatorem dzisiejszej refleksji, pana Michela Lambert. Witam bardzo serdecznie i przekazuję głos.
Okay, so apparently the microphone is working, so that's quite good for the beginning. It's a real pleasure to be here in Gdansk in the European Union right now and to speak about NATO and especially NATO's future. It's quite impressive because 25 years ago it would have been barely imaginable to stand in Poland and to talk about the future of the alliance due to the Soviet troops who were there. So hopefully we already had an introduction of the panelists and I made a long presentation telling why, according to me, Eastern Europe is somehow becoming more and more important, especially in the relationship of the European Union with the Russian Federation. But I guess we can go straight on the main question because it's going to be a large topic that we have to discuss on. It was quite complicated because I had to focus on different questions. At the same time, talking about NATO's future is always difficult because it goes from NATO's involvement in the Middle East, NATO's involvement in Russia, also in the Baltic area, in the Black Sea, and all those topics are completely different. Of course, if you want to talk about Transnistria or if you want to talk about hybrid warfare in Estonia, it's quite different and complicated. So I decided to focus on 3 major topics. The first one will be intelligence cooperation inside the European Union after the Bataclan attack. It seems to be very important because right now, if we look at the state in the European Union, we're still having some national defense agencies, but there is a lack of intelligence agency and sharing of information and at the same time maybe supranational cooperation. So that will be the first topic we're going to discuss on. The second topic we are going to talk about is the question of military equipment and also military innovation. Recently, the Russian Federation just started to develop or developed an aircraft, 5th generation aircraft, the T-15, which means that the Russian Federation is taking advantage over the European Union because we still have 4th generation aircraft. So we're going to discuss about innovation in the sense of an European Union that is still relying on the United States and especially United States equipment in order to ensure its future. And the last question we're going to ask is the question of hybrid warfare. For a long time, NATO and European nations relies on the Article 5 of the Washington Treaty. And the Russian Federation, using hybrid warfare in Donbass, tried and succeeded into finding a way in order to escape from this Article 5. So my first question will be on the current events that happened in Paris, so Bataclan's attack, but at the same time Charlie Hebdo, and also in Brussels. We see that we're having some terrorists, mostly coming whether from inside the European Union or from Middle East, that are using Russian or Soviet weapons in order to perpetrate many actions inside the European Union. So my question would be more, if we look, for example, at the state right now, and if we look at the intelligence agency in France, there is obviously a lack of information and knowledge about what is happening in countries such as Ukraine. If you look at Germany, there is a huge amount of information about what is happening in Ukraine, but there is some difficulties to really understand what is happening in the Middle East. So one of the questions is, why do we still, in the European Union, don't have any CIA like they do in the United States? And what kind of cooperation can we really imagine in the close future in order to ensure European safety? And that would be a general question, maybe from left to right. So if it's good to you.
Is this on? I'm probably not the best one to answer the question about why there is not a European CIA. But what I will do is note that one of the challenges I think we face, particularly with militants coming from the Middle East, it's a subject I've been working on for the last decade and a half, including in the U.S. Department of Defense when I served there, is the challenge we have in Syria from an intelligence perspective is one that is different from what we faced in both Afghanistan and Iraq, where the intelligence collection apparatus was fairly robust. There was a decent sense of militants coming into and out of those countries. The challenge we have in Syria is the architecture is much less robust in those areas. The presence, the Western presence in Syria in particular, Iraq to probably a lesser degree, is less robust. And so what we have is more gaps in our understanding of individuals coming to and from Europe, North Africa, the Caucasus, and other locations. And the issue, I think, is, from my perspective, at least living in Washington, is it makes it incredibly important to cooperate across the Atlantic Ocean in sharing information of individuals that are using false passports. One of the things that's been challenging about ISIS in particular has been their use of off-the-shelf technology to communicate with each other. Apps like WhatsApp that have been more difficult to monitor, which does really highlight, I think, the need to cooperate across the Atlantic. So just from my brief perspective, not being able to comment on a European CIA, I will say that the importance of this particular threat, I think based on the challenges we have in intelligence collection, particularly in Syria, makes it incredibly important to cooperate across that Atlantic.
The floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Good morning. The reason why there's no CIA in the European Union is because the European Union is not a state. And it took many, many decades, if not centuries, to the United States to get a CIA after they became a state, you know, so it might take some more time. Regarding those, the wake of the attacks in Paris and Brussels, definitely they have, I agree, they have exposed the serious weaknesses and serious loopholes within the intelligence coverage of EU countries. Those networks are fragmented, work in isolation, in a state of lack of connectivity at a time when terrorists can use the freedom to cross borders freely. And truly there's also a lack of communication between national police authorities, but even within individual countries, there are different, well, intelligence services, police services, and this is certainly not proper to European countries. The Inquiry Commission into 9/11 attacks have established that there was also a lack of communication between different services. So individual countries, national countries have come to realize the crippling effect of such a state of things in the fight against terrorism, and a number of actions have indeed been taken in the wake of these events, but those are more relevant to the EU, because this is where the terrain, that's domestic police action, it's more relevant to the EU than to NATO, definitely. And so taking stock of what had happened and all the loopholes that have been identified, first of all, the bilateral cooperation has been enhanced between countries, and of course, while countries more faced to terrorists, such as France and Belgium, and we realize that the lack of communication between the polices on two sides of the borders were part of the problem. But at the EU level, there's been early April a proposal of the Commission to improve the Schengen information systems with better biometric identification schemes, sharing of databases amongst security forces, the passenger name record and other systems. Those are extremely welcome initiatives, and this is the way we welcome them, aiming at a comprehensive approach of border controls and homeland security. Secondly, that was also in April, the Commissioner for Homeland Affairs, Avramopoulos, has presented a strategy consisting in evolving from a juxtaposition of national policies to a so-called paradigm of an overall protection of European Union as a whole. And this scheme is dwelling on directives pertaining to well, the implementation and the connecting between the directives aimed at fighting terrorism, at also data protection and data sharing, which is the other side of data protection, firearms regulations, border control, border protection systems, in order to moot a holistic approach to and to fill the loopholes and miscommunication that have between all those specific systems already existing. Lastly, the EC also offered a smart border scheme. This was also enabled, so a flurry of initiatives, proposal of an entry-exit system to register movements of all foreigners across external borders of the EU. We think the proposal could have been bolder, and we work at that aim, but this is certainly something which would remind us of the ESTA system you have in the United States. And last but not least, Commission has, and the Council has endorsed in December the creation of a EU border guard and coast guard core, which, well, should be operational as early as that thought. So this is a whole array, a rich array of measures taken in emergency mode, but which aim at tightening the whole system of keeping terrorists off the ground and chasing them within the borders of the EU. Thank you.
Of course, I fully share the answer you got from Ambassador of France. We are not a state, so we don't have, and we will not have a European intelligence agency. But the question may be formulated in a different way. Should we share more intelligence? Should we cooperate? And can we cooperate more on sharing information regarding the threats coming from the south, north, and also coming from our own states? Because part of the problem we are dealing now in Europe is that the source of threat are pretty much internal, domestic. Of course, they are closely related with the outside world, but we need to apply different means to fight with them. So, first thought I would like to share with you is that that allies don't share intelligence with each other, and they are very reluctant to do it for a number of reasons. First, we have to protect those who are providing us this information. And that's, national state domain. If we engage ourselves in very close relations with our people who give us this information, we take some responsibility for their security, and we have to protect these sources. We have to protect the means how we are dealing with them, and how we are acquiring this information. Then, last but not least, we spy against each other. That's the real life. And of course, allies should rather avoid such activities. But from time to time, we can read papers, and last couple of years in newspapers, we can read that some states tape it, heads of states, and it happens. So that's also the problem we have. Of course, within the NATO and within the European Union and within the Interpol, we share the outcomes of our independent national intelligence networks. I mean, what they produce, what they inform. And of course, as allies, as allies, we share the warnings. Yes, we share our knowledge about the threats that are coming or possibly may cause troubles for our societies. So in that sense, this alliance works both in the framework of the EU and in the framework of NATO. More than that, I think there is a responsibility for protecting societies which don't belong to our alliance. So we also, from time to time, share the warnings with other countries, particularly if they are connected with the threats we are fighting with. So, should we do it more? Of course, yes. Even within the alliance, some states are engaging with very close cooperation in the intelligence sphere. There is a famous special relationship between British intelligence and American intelligence agencies. However, even there, if you read books, there are some limitations, and this special relationship is really special indeed. So they share, but with some restrictions. Yes, I think we have to divide also in our minds the labor between the EU and NATO. If we deal with the threats which are coming from inside the member states, that's the case for EU rather than for NATO. Of course, there are, as I said, these threats are quite often interconnected, but nevertheless, Europe should focus itself on problems coming from inside of member states. While NATO is for providing peace by collective security, but NATO should protect us, should shield our societies from the threats coming from the outside. And also in regard of intelligence cooperation, this very basic red line, division line, should be kept in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for the invite. It's always good to discuss NATO summit security, not in Warsaw, because it's tend to be the centristic approach to security. When we are sitting in library, in fact, I realized that intelligence is about knowledge. It's about all those things that we can see around us, but it's also about one crucial element which is necessary to strengthen intelligence sharing: trust. Trust between allies, trust between partners, a matter without which we cannot enhance the strategic cooperation between allies and partners and the organization themselves. 2 points here, because I think the intelligence is something that links directly, intelligence or a broader element of intelligence, which links directly the two other topics that you've mentioned: capabilities and hybrid warfare. I tend to think only through the prism of the NATO summit, which I'm very sorry, I will come back to the NATO summit for a second, because I believe, I mean, obviously there is life after the NATO summit, but well, there is, I'm quite sure about that, but nevertheless, NATO summit offers at least two vital elements for, let's put it, the intelligence community. First one is how we should strengthen EU-NATO cooperation in terms of intelligence sharing, or in a broader sense, how we put EU-NATO cooperation on the agenda of the NATO summit. And second are the capabilities necessary for strengthening intelligence, or put it more broadly, ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Shortly about EU-NATO, I think in the last 2 years, since 2014, we really have observed that in both organizations, the element of strengthening of intelligence is becoming more important, with all the restrictions and reservations that were pronounced here by my distinguished co-panelists. Nevertheless, we see that there is a willingness both in the EU and NATO to strengthen those pillars. Now we should think how we can share the intel that we have, that we provide to both organizations as nations between those two organizations, which are providing security to transatlantic area. And I think it's doable, and I think the linchpin here is hybrid warfare, something that obviously, you know, right now it's a sexy topic, everybody talks about hybrid threats, we define them differently, but nevertheless, in a sense, we can use politically that occasion to strengthen EU-NATO cooperation in intelligence sharing. First thing, documents releasable to the EU and NATO, which should be a combined standard for both organizations. Intelligence and capabilities, because that's also a crucial element from our perspective. In order to know what's happening, you need to have also human resources, but capabilities to know what's happening around on the northern, eastern, southern flank. Capabilities are necessary for the whole neighborhood. And here we believe, especially when it comes to the NATO summit, that some capabilities such as AWACS system, AGS, and which are being used right now, for example, in order to enhance our situational awareness in the southern flank regarding the dramatic situation on the Turkish-Syrian border. We know that we need to make that the usage of those ISR systems more broad, in the sense that it also encompasses the eastern and the northern flank. So I will stop here because I believe it gives us somehow a direct jump into your second question about capabilities. So, thanks.
Operation. I mean, looking at the current event in Paris and at the same time in Brussels, it's appeared to be clear to me that somehow we need to strengthen this somehow relationship between NATO and the European Union. That's obvious, but I was maybe expecting something about this, I mean, common project, because for example in the European Union there is a lack of spy satellite, so that's quite an issue. In France we're having some projects and also in Germany, but I'm quite sure that in Poland there is a lack of means, and it's quite strange to me that we're still spying on each other when in fact we have some bigger threat to deal with, especially the Russian one and also the Chinese one. But it's quite interesting at least to have this perspective from the inside, showing that still everybody's agree on the fact that we need to go further for this cooperation, but at the same time nobody really wants to go further, or at least nobody really knows how to go further. And that's quite interesting. And it's led to the second question, the question of...
Maybe we are doing it, but not talking about it.
Maybe also that's a possibility. Moving back to the other question, which is somehow connected to the first one, it's military industry. For a long time, of course, the American people have been leader in this domain, especially when it's coming to military aircraft, to nuclear weapons, and so on. And recently, the Russian Federation, who seems to be within some sort of outdated military and capability, just revealed that they have a 5th generation aircraft, the T-50. To make it very simple, because maybe some of you are not expert of this domain, 5th generation aircraft, there is only, in the current situation, the American people who have the F-22, the F-35, the Chinese people who just make one, and the Russian people. The advantage of the 5th generation aircraft, it's in front of a 4th generation aircraft like, for example, the Eurofighter or even the Rafale from Dassault. It's impossible to see it with a radar, which means that you're having a complete advantage in front of your enemy. So the Russian people having this T-50 somehow are taking advantage over the European Union, which explains why the American people decided to send some F-22 in Poland recently in order to train the Polish people, and also in Romania. So my question will be the next one, and it will be for Mr. Debski. So my question would be, do we really have to fear some other Russian army, as most part of the equipment are in fact outdated? We can see it especially in the war in Syria, because they are still using Su-24 and Su-25, and we have this tendency to present the Russian army as a concrete threat for the European Union. But when you just look at statistics, most part of the equipment are still going back to the old Soviet time. So what do you think about this perspective of a modern Russian army, or do we really need to fear the Russian military capability, at least right now?
Well, you said that some of us are not experts on technicalities in military field, and definitely I'm one of these people. But so let me approach to your question from very general angle. Now, a month ahead of Warsaw Summit, we are thinking about adaptation of our alliance to first new strategic environment, and of course to new environment caused by the progress of technology. And of course thinking about that and having in mind the Article 5, about which we are going to say a few words in a minute, we have also Article 3. I mean, which those who are not familiar with, with the Washington Treaty, I would like to remind that Article 3 is about investing into national capabilities in order to have all the alliance strong and able to meet the threats for the all allies. So it means that we have to adapt our national military capabilities, our defense capabilities, to the situation in which Russian armed forces are being equipped with new technical tools. And of course, it has always been very typical for NATO alliance that we can do it only together. So, of course, only some countries, some member states, were able to meet technical requirements, innovations, to respond to the new, to the new technical environment from the side of the potential enemy. But there are only few such countries. So only together we can join forces and respond in an adequate way. For such a country like Poland, there is a quite obvious choice. Whether we, if we are talking about this advanced fifth generation airplane fighter, we can either opt for some European solution, or we could join the solution provided by the United States. And there is the program, a new one, F-35, and some European allies have already joined this program: Norway, Italy, Great Britain. So the option is there. And of course, in some, in next decade, we'll have to make such a decision. Which option we are going to choose? The difference is that F-35, however expensive and however with problems, but is already on the market, while fifth generation fighter on made by some European consortium is still in the phase of planning. So it would also influence the ultimate decision of the Polish government in this regard. Yes, Putin's Russia invests a lot in rising military capabilities of Russian army. Yes, it would require changing our thinking about our budget in Europe. Definitely, the trend has been slightly already reversed, because for the 25 years we rather had the inclination to cut the defense budget in Europe, while since 2014 I believe the trend has been already reversed, and we are going to spend more. Also to meet the arguments quite often being heard in the United States that actually there are too many free riders into the alliance, and this cost of maintaining the alliance should be more evenly shared. So, but I think that we are going in this direction.
So, talking about the F-35, it's quite interesting because we're having right now the F-22 in Poland and also in Romania. And my question would be for the American ambassador, which makes sense, right?
I don't think so.
No, you don't think so?
Aircraft capabilities.
No, not really yourself. Okay, because my main question was looking at all the reports concerning the F-35. It's like apparently there is a huge amount of problem, and it's quite difficult. And you just started again the production of F-22, and instead of focusing on the F-35. So when can we see, for example, F-35 in Poland instead of F-22? And you don't have any idea at all. Okay. Maybe there is someone who can answer to this question among you, because it's the big project, in fact, for NATO is the F-35, because the F-22 is somehow not outdated, but it's like the Chinese people and the Russian people are making some new aircraft, so maybe it would be great for us to make some new one too. So, is there anyone in there who's able maybe to take this question?
No, but I can change the question somewhat.
Okay, that would be good.
Which is, I think the bigger issue is not the F-35 issue, which is an important one, but the broader issue, I think, if we step back and look at NATO today, I mean, we do have to acknowledge that we are in a different position from several years ago. The Russian annexation of Crimea, support to militants in Eastern Europe has generated concerns in particular about the Baltic states and about Eastern European states, including Poland. I think the issue, frankly, is how do we push the level of tension down, frankly, the way Presidents Reagan and Gorbachev did at Reykjavik in the 1980s. But the reality is that there are tensions at the moment. And I think the issue is less capabilities like the F-35 and more posture-related issues, at least as I see it. I don't think, as we've looked at Russian capabilities, the Russians, for example, on air, space, maritime, ground, and even cyber capabilities are not at the Chinese levels, for example, in their anti-access area denial capabilities, their space-based capabilities. But they do have some advanced capabilities. I think the issue, and there's been some press about this, there have been a number of organizations, including RAND, that have been involved in games in Eastern Europe, particularly the Baltics. This issue is, I consider, low probability, but the question I think that has elicited some concerns is in roughly 24 of these games, this is a Russian incursion into the Baltics. The results are unambiguous, and that is NATO cannot successfully defend the territory of Baltic states in the event of a Russian incursion. Again, in virtually all of them, Tallinn and Riga are taken in about 60 hours. I think this probability is low, and I don't think this is the direction one wants to go in, but I would say this does bring up the issue less of the F-35 and more of issues like do we rethink posture in the Baltic states? Do we think the capabilities to protect Baltic states or Poland in the event of an escalation of tensions? I think that's a more interesting question. The challenge, though, is how does one protect and give the Baltic states or Poland a sense of security without creating an escalation of the situation more broadly, without raising Moscow's concerns, in which it does have some legitimate ones. And this is where I think the Russian capabilities are worth noting. Again, in my sense, the issue is less their outright capabilities and more when you look at what they have near the Baltics: motorized, mechanized, tanks, artillery battalions with multiple rocket launchers. They would have the capability quickly to move into the Baltics with limited forces there. I think that's the issue we have to grapple with in a way that we can both ensure long-term security, but without going into a direction, I think, that makes Moscow more insecure.
Okay, I may skip all technical question because I had one also for the French ambassador, but let's skip this. Let's skip this one. That's done with the aircraft. I guess it's better. But it's quite interesting because when we're talking about the Baltics and the question of security and also position, or at least official position toward Russia, we see that Russian imperialism, or at least state of mind, seems to be expanding, or at least try to find a way to expand the Russian territory. And there is several opinions inside the European Union and even in the United States. Some position and official position, for example, Angela Merkel is a classical realpolitik, which means that you need to continue to have some good relationship with Russia and you see what will happen. Some other country, I would say mostly like Poland, are having this attitude toward Russia, which is more, let's be more intrusive, or at least let's show to the Russian people that if they go too far, we are able to react. And at the same time, there is of course the Estonian people who are kind of way much more aggressive than the Polish people, but in a different way because they focus in cyberspace. So, but my question would be, what is, according to you, the best attitude that we should have toward Russia? Should we show more responsiveness, or should we be more pragmatic and try to calm down the game, or what are we supposed to do exactly with the Russian people, and especially with someone with Vladimir Putin, which is obviously an imperialistic state of mind? Or maybe with the American ambassador, because we...
Sure. I just want to catch where we're going. So we're on Russia right now, or are we going to capabilities of NATO later? Or,
no, we're still on Russia. What should we do with NATO?
Right, I'm just not wanting to talk about things that we're going to talk about later. You're going to get to NATO capabilities.
After we go straight to hybrid warfare, so that's...
okay, so. Hybrid warfare and NATO capabilities, no?
No, I mean...
Okay,
no,
I'm just wondering how to answer the question, that's all. I thought we had an outline. Okay.
Hybrid warfare, I guess after we're running out of time.
So with regard to Russia, you know, our view, and I think frankly the common view in the alliance, of course there's always differences of, shades of differences, but the strength of the NATO alliance is one of the foundational strengths is unity, and I think we have a fairly unified approach to Russia, and that is, the way I would put it is we have seen Russian behavior in Ukraine. We have seen what Russia is capable of in terms of capabilities. We have seen intentions that were unpredicted, and we can get to some of the capabilities in hybrid warfare. And as an alliance, it is our responsibility to put in place the capabilities to both deter and to defend the alliance. That we don't intend for that to be escalatory. Obviously, that can sometimes be perceived that way, and that's where we have to make sure that our rhetoric and the dialogue that we also have going with Russia, as we had a meeting of the NATO-Russia Council recently, is designed to communicate that that is what we're doing, putting in defensive capabilities, robust defensive capabilities, because the capabilities and the sort of snap exercises and other things that Russia has done near NATO territory, has frankly been alarming. But we are not, there's no sense in raising the tensions. And then more broadly, there are some areas where we can and we should work cooperatively with Russia, where our interests coincide. They don't necessarily coincide when there's, I should say, overlapping interests. And we see that to some degree in Syria, where we saw it, for example, in the chemical weapons removal. We see that, for example, in some areas of the Arctic. And we should always strive to have a relationship where in those areas that we are able to cooperate for the common benefit, we do that. That we don't have a relationship where things spill over from one area to the other. And the corollary of that is that we don't trade things off. So, because there's cooperation here, it's not leveraged there, because our approach is to work cooperatively where we can, but where we must and where we disagree, to put in place the deterrence and the defense to protect our alliance.
Maybe some other comment about that?
Sure. Yes. Would like to go? Certainly, but so we're still on Russia or on defense industry?
No, we are on Russia right now.
Being in
Russia and what should we do?
It always gets back to Russia. No. Definitely I think I would stick to the wisdom of the views expressed by my American colleague, who in a way is seeing the whole forest instead of just one tree, and the same holds true for the issue of armament. F-35 is not the issue. It's the matter is much broader, and if we want to take it in its broader context, I think, and since we're in the run-up to the Warsaw NATO summit, I think what we are doing right now is to move the posture of NATO one step further from reassurance to deterrence. And well, the crux of the matter here is an enhanced forward presence on the eastern flank, and this is probably one of the major decisions that will be taken during the summit. In our view, it reflects the strong commitment, our strong commitment to make sure that all allies enjoy the highest level of security, regardless of their specific situation. Now, what is still in the making is the precise shape of that enhanced forward presence, and there I think it's wise to keep in mind three tenets pertaining to those measures. They have to be politically acceptable, they have to be militarily justified, and they have to be sustainable in the long run. Political acceptability means that in our relation with Russia, we need to strike the right balance between showing resolve and maintaining possible channels of communication and dialogue. That's what Paul just said. We must remain firm when it comes to the territorial integrity and sovereignty of all allies. But on the other hand, we also have to maintain a predictable and transparent posture on the eastern flank. Military point of view, I think one has to stick to the parameters defined by the NATO Ministers of Defense at their last meeting in February. And last but not least, we have to make sure that all the decisions we will take in Warsaw in July are sustainable in the long run, including from a budgetary point of view, as the security environment on the eastern flank will probably not improve dramatically in the coming years, and I think my Polish colleagues will concur, and nothing would undermine the credibility of NATO more than commitments which would prove difficult or impossible to meet in the near future. This is, I think, the general thinking of France regarding in the run-up to this summit. On the other hand, deterrence is not just armored tanks to protect the Suwalki, how do you call that?
Suwalki Gap.
Yeah, thank you. NATO, of which 3 members have nuclear weapon, NATO has a deterrent potential that ranges from the lowest ranking weaponry, infantry weaponry, all the way up to nuclear weapon. And this is what, together with show of resolve ensures the deterrent effect, the deterrent potential of our posture. This is what the answer I would like to give. We have a strong, NATO federates the major military powers in the world, acting together in a spirit of unity is the deterrent, and backing up the resolve by a whole range of weapons provides the highest possible deterrent effect. And certainly we count on the summit in Warsaw to reaffirm that the obvious in that regard. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. There was maybe another comment about that?
I would like to have 3 comments, 3 points. No, short ones. I'm always brief. Because dialogue. I want to make it very clear that Poland has never opposed dialogue with Russia. To the contrary, we believe, and I hear concur both ambassadors, that it's something of crucial importance. We only want to understand what is the end state of the dialogue. That's very important for us to understand what kind of strategic vision we have with Russia beyond the summit, because as I said, summit is just a stop in a long journey of our relationship with Russia. And this is what we are trying to grasp right now and trying to offer and trying to set without undermining the commitments that were undertaken by allies before. And I'll put full stop here because that's not the topic of the discussion. Capabilities, deterrence, Russia. I think all those elements are crucial to understand where we are. In order to be effective and credible in our deterrence, we need capabilities, different capabilities. We need obviously nuclear capabilities. It's great to be on a panel with 2 nuclear powers because it always is the most important element of our deterrence effect that we can provide in NATO. Nevertheless, we need also a conventional deterrence for the purpose of not escalating potentially the crisis into the nuclear domain. It shouldn't be ruled out, but we need also other capabilities. And here, obviously, because Seth mentioned A2AD, and I want to underline the importance of the fact that we see those A2AD bubbles. I mean, sorry, it's like we are talking in jargon, I think. A2AD, anti-access area denial. So capabilities, I mean, imagine that you're walking from your home and you want to reach your mother's home, and you're going through a forest, and then you know that in the forest are bears, but you are not entirely sure if they're going to attack you or not. So you have to take that into consideration, because if the bears are going to attack you, you might end up in a situation when you are not going to reach your mother. I'm sorry, I'm trying also to keep it simple from time to time, because it's important to understand what we are talking about. We are talking about capabilities which are to a large extent undermining our concept of reinforcement. It might happen that the troops, the large amounts of troops which might be necessary to strengthen the defense of the 3 Baltic states and Poland might not come. Therefore, it is, and I totally agree with Ambassador Bühler here, that enhanced forward presence will be the most important element of the enhanced forward presence.
You do not agree?
I do agree. I'm sorry. No, Ambassador. Always. No. Sorry, it's my pronunciation. I do agree with you that enhanced forward presence will be the biggest delivery of the summit. And as you rightly said, we are discussing how it should be built. But nevertheless, it's important to understand that those enhanced forward presence should also have the necessary capabilities to tackle A2AD threats. And the third point I want to make is obviously that in order to have those capabilities, we need money. It's an important element. It's hard in times of situation. It's hard for us also to convince society that we need to invest in defense. But I think it's also a job for politicians, journalists, media, to try to explain that investment in defense is not only a prerequisite for collective defense, but also it can bring tangible economic results. Therefore, what we are thinking about is not only Wales' investment pledge, so 2% of GDP spent on defense, but also rather a new concept, defense planning pledge. So something that is not only concentrated on the input, so how much money you invest, but what kind of capabilities you get at the end of the process. And I think it's important when we try to connect all those dots, which are everywhere. All those dots, capabilities, deterrence, reassurance, and defense. And I mean, hopefully not, hopefully never ever. This is why we are doing those elements. And I totally agree with what Director Dembski said, is we do it in order, the deterrence, we do it for peace in the end. We do not want to have war. And I think we are also doing dialogue just to make sure that never ever the conflict is going to happen here in that part of the region, because that would be a disaster not only for Poland, but for the region as a whole. And I will stop here, not to...
On Russia, 2 fingers. Okay. On this subject, I know something, really.
Good to know, good to know.
So, my first finger would be about the notion of dialogue. There are different styles of dialogue, and definitely dialogue within the alliance, among the alliance, goes in different way than with the partners outside of the alliance. That's one thing. Another thing is that you know, culture dialogue collocates positively. So there is a widespread perception in some member states, countries, that dialogue is about surrender. So that we surrender some of our approaches, we surrender our views, we surrender our interests. And I would like to emphasize that dialogue, it is not about surrender, but dialogue is about informing the partner about our own interest and about our stance on important issues. And there is also Russian way of dialogue, Russian style of dialogue. And we in this part of Europe know this particular style very well. And the second thing would be about the means of dialogue. Have you seen the Hollywood movie 13 Days? Excellent movie with Kevin Costner, and the movie is about Cuban Missile Crisis. There is a scene, a beautiful one, where Secretary of Defense McNamara is talking to some US admiral. And they both are looking at the great map with the positions of US ships and Russian transport ships, Soviet in sense. And the admiral wanted to allow the captain of, the commander of one of US destroyers to open fire because the Russians are approaching to the red line, which was set by the president. And McNamara stops him telling, you know what we are looking at? Of course, you know, there are ships, you know, there's a map with the position of ships. And McNamara says, no, it is a language. It is a language by which President of the United States communicates with Khrushchev about our policy. It gives me an opportunity to compare what NATO now is doing vis-à-vis Russia and what we are doing, what we are going to do in Warsaw Summit. We are going to communicate to our Russian partners that we are ready, willing, and able to defend ourselves. We are spreading the message to deter, to prevent something goes wrong, and to sustain peace in Europe.
Thanks a lot. Okay, let's move forward to the last question, because I know that the ambassador of the United States has quite a busy schedule. That's what I learned. Let's move to this question of, everyone, but apparently you more than the others. So according to my information, but me, they're not, I mean, the longer you stay, the better it is. But question is on hybrid warfare. So far, for a long time, just after the Second World War, NATO and the whole alliance relied on the 5th article of the Washington Treaty, which means that if one country was under attack, all the other countries will have, should reply and should defend this country under attack, which was one of the main reasons why Estonia, for example, and small Baltic states decided to join, because it's way to be sure that nothing will happen to you, because they can rely on the United States and also on France or even on Germany and the UK. But looking at the current situation in Ukraine, but not only in Ukraine, also in Moldova with Transnistria, in Georgia with Abkhazia, South Ossetia, even in Azerbaijan and Armenia with Nagorno-Karabakh, it seems that the Russian people are having a sort of policy toward ethnic minorities, and they are using it in order to develop, I would say, civil war, and then after destabilize the whole country, the so-called process of hybrid warfare. What can we do, or what can NATO do in such situation? Because, for example, 24% of the population in Estonia is Russian-speaking population, mostly located in the eastern part of the country. If the Russian people try to do the same thing as what they did in Ukraine, which is possible, what kind of response can we have in NATO? Because it doesn't go obviously under the 5th article. So do we have any, to make it simple, do we have any counter-hybrid warfare process so far? That will be for you first, and yeah, okay, first to you.
Okay, thank you. Let me, yeah, it's working still. Let me widen the aperture a bit, and because I think it's important to touch on NATO's strength more broadly, and I just want to pick up on a rubric that our Deputy Secretary of State used on May 5th when he spoke at the Warsaw Library here in Poland. 3 pillars to NATO's strength. The first is obviously our democracies and our democratic institutions, which is the purpose of NATO, right, to protect our democracies. And it's also the strength of NATO. The foundation of our strength is that we share that. And since we're citing articles in the Washington Treaty of 1949, Article 2 actually says that you know, the members will contribute by strengthening their free institutions. So it's a constant effort to strengthen our free institutions, because those are the foundations of the common strength of the alliance. Second, as I mentioned earlier, we talked about earlier a little bit, but unity. And unity goes to the assessment of the threats and the responses. It doesn't mean, and there is robust debate before there's unity, but we try to keep that robust, the most robust parts of that debate inside NATO headquarters, because we don't want to project divisions that can be oftentimes misunderstood by outsiders as a weakness or a vulnerability. It's our strength to have these debates, but the agreement of the alliance is at the end of the day, we will identify the threats from the east, from the south, we will respond, we will, you know, fulfill our 2% you know, commitments to spending on defense capabilities. And I think, and wrapping in the hybrid question and going back maybe to the intelligence question at the beginning, I think one of the, and the third area, sorry, I should say, is capabilities, and we've talked about that some is the, you know, not only what we input, but what we put on the table and what we're capable of putting on the table as the alliance, and it is, you know, certainly the strongest alliance in the world and the strongest in history. Wrapping up, as I said, the elements of this question with the earlier question, I think one of the great successes of our approach to the crisis in Ukraine was unity in assessing what was happening, because it wasn't so clear. I was very closely involved in this in my previous job in the State Department, where we were seeing these funny things happening in Crimea and in eastern Ukraine, in Donbass, which were not always readily apparent who was doing what and to whom. But we all focused on it, and we all pooled our resources, and we shared a lot of information repeatedly, with sometimes great difficulty, because not always do our intelligence agencies want to share. But I think that common sharing kept us all unified, as we see today in our response with our sanctions, maintaining sanctions on Russia until it complies with the Minsk agreements. Because, as you say, what Russia did was using hybrid warfare, and that is, I think, the most likely scenario for any future incursion. So it's the use of disinformation, the use of intelligence operatives, the manipulation of local actors who perhaps were not capable or prominent before they were supplied and assisted. Ultimately, the support from conventional sides, the cyber element, which we've seen being used. I think that you know, NATO is certainly capable, but only in partnership with other institutions and with the common understanding of the need to strengthen domestic capabilities. And this goes, for example, one area, cyber, which is actively being discussed as commitments that states could make to certain standards of cyber defensive capabilities, and that the EU and NATO could understand as well. So we're all sort of looking at a common picture and are able to assess where are we vulnerable and where do we maybe need to assist each other to strengthen our capabilities against hybrid. So I think NATO has an important role to play, and it's an important, I think it'll be an important element of the Warsaw Summit.
Maybe some other comment
about hybrid warfare. Sorry. So you gave a definition of what hybrid warfare is, Paul, so I will not delve into that. What I should say, it's certainly, it appeared, it was quite a surprise to all of us when it appeared in Ukraine and Little Green Man and then in Donbass. And definitely it should be factored into the NATO posture, or into our posture. On the other hand, there's always a tendency to fight the last war rather than to prepare for the next one. So definitely it is a risk, it is a threat, and addressing it, I think in the first place we don't have the option of responding in kind to hybrid warfare, for we treasure compliance with international law, we treasure predictability and transparency. This is our political posture. But definitely we should address it, this threat, in a comprehensive mode by identifying the vulnerabilities, by strengthening resilience, both social resilience, but also resilience of critical infrastructures, communication. There's certainly a need in fending off such a threat for better coordination between all players, and indeed hybrid warfare, especially if it comes in the form of cyber warfare, as we have witnessed a few days ago with Germany. Many players in each country are involved, and there's numerous agencies. So coordinating those agencies, coordinating countries with the international organizations, be it NATO or EU, and coordinating organizations between themselves is of the essence. We think that we also should start elaborating on a case-by-case basis politically binding standards in the area where hybrid threat is liable to operate. I mentioned cyberspace, but crime, organized crime may also be a way of throwing challenges. And definitely, well, we have already a very broad array of tools within NATO. We should definitely factor in and introduce the hybrid threat into those tools, into the NATO Rapid Action Plan. We should also introduce hybrid scenarios into exercises and support interoperability. But once again, more broadly, the best defense still is political resolve and unity amongst us. And if I may just add one last thought, that it adds to all the existing challenges we got in the field of defense and security. And again, it will come with a fee. It will come with costs and entice and force us or compel us to raise our defense expenditure, which is always a politically challenging task for our politicians. Thank you.
Thanks. 3 quick comments on hybrid warfare. The first is, I mean, this is nothing new. So people who've argued that NATO may not be in a position to do this kind of thing, I think when you look across history, hybrid warfare is generally used by states and has been used by states when the costs of conventional or strategic, in the case of nuclear conflict, is too high and deemed as too high. We see it with India and Pakistan today that have resorted to various aspects of it. The US and the Soviets during the Cold War all practice some form in various locations of this. But I think there are some interesting, this gets to the second point, there are some interesting lessons we can learn along these lines from European states. If they had to face this across Europe, the Swiss, for example, have a long-standing history of resistance in the face of invasion, training and equipping, operating local defense forces, preparing transportation infrastructure for demolition, decentralized resistance activities, coordinated information campaign. The Finns have done the same. There are some interesting models. But let me make a final third point, and this actually has a lot to do with the library where we're sitting, all of which, and the museum we're sitting in, to tie in a point that the US Ambassador Jones, no relation to me as far as I'm aware, although we may have common ancestors in Wales. And that is that one of the advantages that we have here, and this extends into the Baltics, is the advantage that solidarity showed us, and which is the triumph of peace and freedom and democracy. And I think whether we look at the struggles we face in the Baltics or in Poland in the future and concerns about an invasion, that in the end, those principles and values, which the Deputy Secretary of State noted recently, and I actually saw him before that trip, that's in part a battle of ideas. And I think if solidarity showed us anything, which it did during the Cold War, it's that organizations like that sit on the right side. And so I think when it comes to hybrid struggles, and the information struggles, that in the end, we're going to sit collectively on the right side. And again, as I look around to the books here, and I've been up into the stacks, there are plenty of lessons here, including nonviolent resistance, as the President mentioned earlier. Thanks.
3 points on hybrid. Hybrid threats, and I think it's important to underline that because we are mentioning a lot of articles. Hybrid threats could lead to through hybrid warfare could lead to Article 5. That's something that we agreed upon as allies, and it's important to remember always that a combination of threats could lead to a potential big-scale crisis. This is why we also have Article 4 in NATO, which is about consultations and trying to figure out where we are when one of the countries or more countries are in danger. But I want to pay attention not only to ourselves, so not only NATO, the EU, member states, allies, but also by helping our partners, which are most exposed to potential hybrid threats, building their resilience, building their security sectors. We can in fact contribute to our security. So we start not with ourselves, but also with our neighborhood, which is crucial for the understanding. And I'm stopping here. Thank you.
About very brief note about the hybrid warfare. This part of Europe does have an experience with this particular mean of conducting war. So for us, hybrid warfare it is not anything new. In 1939, in September, when the Soviet Union launched aggression against Poland, Soviet diplomacy introduced the idea to justify the aggression, spreading the interpretation that actually there was no democracy in Poland, that was a fascist junta in Warsaw, and actually Poland's institution failed. It is a very important element of this part of Europe, strategic culture. So that leads me to the conclusion, first conclusion, that we have to be very careful not to make a medicine, a therapy, worse than disease we'd like to cure, and not to invite more trouble we have. So that's my first conclusion from about the hybrid warfare. But there is another important conclusion. We have to, we are all democratic societies aligned within Northern Atlantic Alliance. So we have to bear in mind that democracy, it is a self-regulating system. All democracy made mistakes and are entitled to make mistakes. United States is not an exclusion. But we have to emphasize and bear in mind, it is about self-regulation. If we try to regulate the system from outside, we can cause the effect which is in English called rely around the flag. It means that we could rather enhance the bad tendencies than cure the bad ones. And in November, the significant portion of American society would grant a new president the right to commit mistakes on behalf of the nation. And it is a part of democracy. And we will have next elections, which would cure the mistakes committed by the predecessors. So that's the only way we can have self-regulating system within our democratic societies. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, gentlemen, for this amazing, honestly, intervention, and quite an interesting topic, and sadly we don't have much time to talk about many others. So, warm thank you to every one of you, especially to you. I'm quite sad that sadly, we don't have more time for some questions, but maybe if we are taking a coffee together, it would be this perfect opportunity. Thanks a lot. Have a good day.